Welcome to the Dateable AF podcast because women dating women is wild, wonderful, and occasionally a disaster. I'm your host, Dr. Sarah Kyle, a therapist in private practice.
And I'm your co-host, Rachel Howell, researcher extraordinaire.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 9 of the Dateable AF podcast. Today, we are talking about El Camino energy. Is it a car or is it a truck? Being bisexual in a binary world.
I wonder if most people know about it, El Camino.
I mean, can't figure out what it is. So, are you one of those people that when people say, do you like men or women? Do you just say yes because you like both? So we're going to talk today about defining bisexuality. We're going to talk about some of the myths and misconceptions about being bisexual. And we got some things to say about it, y'all.
Yes, we do. And when we say like men and women, we really are saying that like them in a sexual way.
Yes,
not just as friends.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, as the term bisexuality would imply, but
but we don't take anything for granted.
This is true. Because I think that some people, on a side tangent, I think some people have a misconception that lesbians don't like men. So,
oh yeah, they do, and it's not true. There are some. There's no doubt. There's some militant lesbians out there.
True. Lesbian separatists that believe women should just stay separate from men.
And quite honestly, probably separate from us too.
That's true. I don't think they're in our target audience, but I could be wrong. So if you're a lesbian separatist, please give us a shout. Let us
know. Go to Portland. They need you there right now.
That's right. That's right. Okay. So Rachel, our in-house researcher, can you please give us a little definition of bisexuality?
You always are asking me that. That's not what I researched was the definition of bisexuality. I will tell you what I've researched, but the definition of bisexuality is that you're fluid in your sexual preferences between men and women.
Yeah. I mean, this means you're into more than one gender. So, and it doesn't have to be a 50-50 split that you're, exactly equally into both genders. It also doesn't mean that you're confused. I think that is a common myth that people think bisexual people are confused about who they like. And I don't believe that's true at all.
I used to think that really in my early years of coming out because I wasn't as aware as I am now of sort of how much more fluid that is. As we'll talk about that, I love this this idea of teasing that you might be greedy. So you just want to get to shop on both sides of the aisle.
That's right. But there's nothing wrong with that. But I think it is true that people who identify as bisexual get the side eye. I think especially women who identify as bisexual get the side eye from lesbians. So we're going to unpack some of that for you guys today.
I'd like to sort of ground us in the research that I did do. Thank you, Dr. Kyle.
Well, please tell us what that is, for the love of God.
Oh my God. She throws these questions at me. It's her. She's supposed to be answering that. Anyway, what I did do is just a little topical research and this came from the Pew Research Center, just about the percentages. What's very interesting out there is that 4% of adults identify as bisexual. And so what we're talking about, I want to just clarify this, is that the study that I looked at and the information I looked at, they were not really including the transgender population. So what we're talking about is just at least folks who, if they didn't identify as such, and in the research,
so
right?
Cisgendered people,
generally, yes,
of them in the United States identify as bisexual. Okay,
right. Which is, interestingly enough, they consider 2% of the overall population gay or lesbian.
Interesting.
I know.
Okay.
And so they considered it in this research. They're saying it's like the third, the second most popular sexual preference.
Orientation
Because
after
yeah, orientation.
heterosexuality.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Which I never really thought about it that way. As we suspect, women are more likely to be bi than men, and we'll I'm sure throw a little light into that, but most of our listeners probably know that. And the younger audience, so this younger audience of Gen Xers really is where it started. They're at 11% of self-proclaimed bisexuality. So
Gen X or
definitely
Gen Z?
Gen X, I believe. It's what is the Gen X is 30 to,
Girl, I'm a Gen Xer, so I don't think it's us.
oh, okay, then maybe it's Gen Z. Maybe it is Gen
Yes.
Z. So it's below us, like in the 30.
Millennials and Gen Zers would be my
There you
guess.
go.
Yep.
Okay. I can't keep all those letters straight. Like you have no idea. In this, when I was doing this research, do you know that there are like at least 10 other types of sexual orientations? Oh my God, you wouldn't even believe what all they are. I have no
Yep.
idea. I didn't even know how to pronounce some of them. Anyway, back to the research.
Or that'll be for a different episode. We have to bring in the words that Rachel can pronounce.
And it didn't even include the whole furry thing. That was not in there. So I don't know what you So anyway, back to the research. So the younger, of course, 11% versus 4% is a big spread.
Yes.
And the younger folks that are more clearly identifying as bisexual, and that also bisexuals are quite a bit less likely to come out and to people that they care about or come out publicly. So basically 3/4 of people who identify as gay or lesbian uh, typically are out, at least to their main central circle of family, friends, and about 19% of bi individuals. And I think that is relevant in this conversation today. Two things that stood out to me about this research. One is how the increase in bisexuality presentation. And so I think more and more people are in the dating, more women out there dating are obviously more likely to end up dating somebody who considers themselves bisexual. That's one thing that we'll talk about. And then this other thing that people are not out as much. And again, I think that impacts how you date and the decisions you make around dating, which we touched on last episode. But
Yeah,
those
I
are
think it makes
things that,
sense. Because if your primary relationship is heterosexual, but sometimes you feel attracted to same-sex people, then there wouldn't really be a need to come out necessarily. So I can see why the coming out percentage is lower.
yeah, makes sense to me. And I also think there might be other things that come into play there because a lot more women are bisexual, and we also know a lot more women are coming out as bisexual. And I also think that, as we discussed in the last episode, a lot of women have been in bisexual relationships where they didn't necessarily feel comfortable coming out. So just all of those elements come into play.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I also wanted to touch on the in our definition of bisexuality. There was a sex researcher in the 40s, and I think they actually made a Showtime show called Kinsey. This researcher's name was Alfred Kinsey, and he did a bunch of really groundbreaking work on human sexuality. And prior to his time, sexuality was mostly seen as binary, so you were either straight or you were gay. But Kinsey created this scale, cleverly called the Kinsey scale, that where he said that he rated someone as a 0 on the scale if they identified as exclusively heterosexual, so exclusively opposite sex attracted. And he identified someone as a 6 if they were exclusively same sex attracted. And everything in between kind of represented the varying degrees of attraction to multiple genders. But the interesting thing was his research, and this is even back in the 40s, showed that most people, like almost everyone, falls somewhere in the middle, that most people did not identify as a 0 or a 6. And so this idea that attraction exists on a spectrum came into being really almost a century ago. And many people just didn't have experiences that validated these labels of either being straight or gay.
Funny you mentioned that. I am familiar with that study and that work. When I was looking at this research, I came across a study that was done. It was in reference to that very study. And they did, and you'll know the name of it. It's a sexual tool they use to measure people's sexual body responses.
Oh, plethysmograph.
Plethysmograph.
It measures body flow to your genitals.
Yeah, yes.
Sorry, blood flow. Sorry,
blood flow.
Blood flow to genitals, body flow. Yeah, same.
So it's something that's measuring something in your genital area.
Yes.
And so the fact is that people would claim that they were fluid and more in the middle around their attraction. But when they were hooked up to that machine, the genitals were hooked up to that machine, there was actually a very distinct difference in what their responses. It was much more to one or the other.
The machine does not lie.
So I'm just saying.
Yeah, that's interesting. So thinking about also how you define things along that scale, I believe Kinsey's research defined that by behavior. So if you had any kind of sexual encounter with a same-sex person, I think that was a part of what he used to place someone on the scale. When I was in my doc program, one of my professors said he had a different idea about it, that he thinks that you should base it on what you fantasize about when you're by yourself.
Oh.
So
I'd be put in prison for that.
But Rachel, for the love of God, please clarify. You're fantasizing about children, which, my God.
No.
I don't know what else you're going to go to prison for.
I'm absolutely not into children. Let me just
God, I hope that gets edited out.
Oh my God. Just couldn't help it.
Y'all, we're going to have a whole separate episode to find out what Rachel's fantasizing about that's in prison. Wow, I didn't sit down for this. Oh my God. All right, back to the podcast topic. So, if you are, let's suppose you're in a relationship with a man, but what you're thinking about when you're by yourself having sexual fantasies is sex with a woman.
Age appropriate woman.
Age appropriate only, for the God's sakes. Oh my God.
I'm sorry.
I don't even know where to go from here.
I'm really sorry about that. Whew. Okay. I think we can pull it together now.
Let's move on.
Okay. Where were we?
All right. Well, let's talk about some of the myths about bisexuality. That's a for topic.
Let's do.
One of the myths that I think, and I hear this from parents of teens or young adults, that they think it's just a phase. That, if you have a daughter and she's always dated boys and then all of a sudden she's dating girls, that I often hear parents think, oh, it's just a phase. And I don't think that is true for bisexuality. I think that being bi isn't like a stopover or layover on the way to figuring out if you're gay or straight. I think it's really its own valid destination.
Yes. And the more we've learned about it over time, and the more, actually, I think also the more freedom that people have to admit how they feel, that admission that they are more fluid and not feeling the need to put themselves in one box or another, has really opened a lot of eyes and doors to the whole bisexuality conversation.
Yes, for sure. And we talked about this earlier, but being bi doesn't also mean that you're 50% straight and 50% gay. That's just not how math works. That's not how attraction works. And some people, do lean more toward one gender, and then others kind of kind of shift back and forth over time. So it's really a fluid thing. It's not a fractional thing per se.
I love that term, fractional. And having dated a couple of bisexual women, I also can tell you that their bisexuality, the way that they lean towards either men or women, was different, but between the two of them. For instance, I think one of them was more interested in the history of the flirtation, and I guess also getting male interest, and but emotionally didn't seem to be interested at all in men. And then the other one, I think, was probably a lot more physically and emotionally interested in men, but also very much I'm falling in love with this person no matter what gender they are. But I think underneath it all, she was probably more inclined towards men in the physical sense.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's a good point that you're bringing up too, because when we think of sexual orientation, we do think of physical attraction. I think that there's another piece that doesn't get talked about as much, and that is homoromanticism, which is you're romantically attracted to the same sex partner. And so someone could want to have sex with the opposite sex, but they don't necessarily want to be in a relationship with someone of the opposite sex, or vice versa.
I definitely think that's probably in play more for men than it is for women. But
say more about that.
Well, I do believe that men, first off, there's a lower percentage that are at least admitting that they're bisexual, and that they may have a very secret, deep interest in having sex with men, but their preference is to be with the female partner.
That's interesting. I wonder if that is, I wonder if that's a factor of women being more emotionally available, because I would say, I think the opposite of that is true too, that I know a lot of women who prefer emotional relationships with other women just because they're deeper and more, more connected, but they might still be interested in the sexual aspect of a relationship with a man.
Yeah, so I think both of those things are very true. And I don't know, sometimes with that, I don't know if it's just difficult to know whether it has to do with sex or whether it has to do with that traditional, it's easier to stay in that hetero world because of just your family situation and your history and, all of that. So it's hard to untangle all this.
Yep, that's true. So another myth that I think we hear a lot about bisexual people is that they're confused. And this is really not true at all. I think a lot of times bi folks are clearer than ever, like they're clearer than other people because they don't feel the need to limit themselves to just being attracted to one gender. So
it's really difficult as a garden variety lesbian. It is very difficult sometimes for me to step back and believe that someone can really be that without a preference.
Yeah. What do you think makes that hard for you to believe?
Well, I think because I find men and women emotionally and sexually so different that the experience that you would have on either side of that to me is so completely different. And that there's not that some people actually just like both things just as much as,
This is true. This is true. But you could like mashed potatoes and really spicy salsa. You could like it both.
Yeah, I guess so. It's just my bias.
So another myth, though, about bisexuality is that the person will end up picking a side. And I want to be clear about this, that being in a relationship does not erase your sexual orientation. So you could be in a committed monogamous relationship with a man and still find yourself attracted to women or vice versa. So a bi person who's dating a man or a woman is still bi, even though they've picked a person to be in a relationship with. It doesn't mean that their attraction is strictly to that gender.
That really leads back to the conversation we had in our last episode as it relates to dating, is
Okay.
that I think that makes the dating situation very interesting and requires a lot of communication if someone is truly bi and that they've made a decision. Let's say they've made a choice that they're going to enter a relationship with a woman, but they still have sexual attraction to men, that they are very strongly in check with the decision they've made to be in a relationship with a woman, and not over here wishing that they or getting pulled over towards that.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is a really great topic because if you have an agreement with your partner to be monogamous, then it shouldn't matter whether you're bi, whether you're hanging out with men, whether you're hanging out with women. But I would say the vast majority of heterosexual people I know are not comfortable with their partner having opposite sex friends. And I mean, it's such an interesting concept because, lesbians are attracted to women and we still have women friends. And so we go on trips with our female friends or we go to dinner with our female friends. I don't think the same thing happens in heterosexual relationships as much. That if I'm married to a man, I'm probably not going to go on a trip with my male friend and have my husband be okay with it. But the bottom line is, if you're in a monogamous relationship, are you committed to keeping that agreement? And it shouldn't necessarily matter if you're gay or bi or straight. And if your friends are male or female or non-binary, you got to keep your agreement to be monogamous if you've made that.
I would not have thought about it that way, but that is a great way to look at it. And you're also think it begs the question of thinking a little bit more openly about how your willingness to be sexually open with your partner, so that maybe you fill up that relationship with a lot of fun things that give that other person some things that maybe they want sexually that float a little bit outside of the norm. I don't know.
Yeah. Do you think that someone who's bisexual would be more likely to cheat? Because I think that's another myth that people believe sometimes.
I don't think so, as long as they're very solid in where they stand around relationships and their bisexuality. That's the thing, is that if they are going in thinking that because if they're with a woman, that they're not going to still have those feelings, and then all of a sudden they have those feelings and that's confusion, that's problematic. But
Yeah.
if they know going in that it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't change their attraction necessarily, but the way they're going to act around that is what counts.
Yes, absolutely. That you're almost inevitably going to be attracted to someone else while you're in a relationship. But do you have a commitment to not act on that attraction? Seems like the most important piece.
Yeah, I know. That's a lot to think about. And yeah, here we are again talking about dating, folks. And it is hard enough just to decide who you're going to swipe on and go out with them. And then now we have all this.
That's
So
true.
it's a
It's
lot.
true.
It's a lot to consider.
It is a lot to consider. So, speaking of dating, when you're bi, I think that there are some binds that bi people experience that gay people do not. And one of those is what's called the double closet. So, I mean, in this, I've heard people who are biracial talk about this, that they don't feel gay enough for queer spaces, but they don't feel straight enough for straight spaces, or kind of like mixed race people don't feel black enough for black spaces, but they're not white enough for white spaces. And just that feeling of hovering in between and not necessarily feeling like you have a community that embraces you.
I would venture to guess that the younger population does not deal with this as much as
Yes.
group of individuals.
Yeah, I think you're right, because I think that the Gen Zers just grew up with bisexuality and or fluid sexuality being a thing, that nobody really thinks twice about it. And I mean, we talked about this with our coming out topic too, that I think sometimes now it's not even like a big coming out, like a sit down, I've got to tell you something. It's just like, well, yeah, I think I'm going to date this girl, or I think I'm going to date this boy. So I think that the younger folks have it easier.
The whole idea of if someone is bisexual, they pick a partner and then they stay in that relationship. I do think it's interesting that sometimes we assume that they're no longer bisexual.
Yep. I think that's true. It's like, oh, you've picked a side. Yeah, I have actually a few clients that are in that situation, that are married to someone either same sex or opposite sex, and people just assume that that's their sexual orientation. And they, in fact, identify as bi.
So let's talk a little bit about the navigating rejection, and the fetishization.
Yeah, because I think, well, some lesbians I know would sort of reject someone out of hand if they found out they were bi, because I think they're scared. And I think that rejection is something that bi people do have to face, that there's something about someone who is gay or straight that sort of feels scared and wants to reject you if you identify as bi.
I've definitely been in that position of experiencing that with, like I said, 2 different dating partners, but one is probably more bi than the other, and the one that is more bi than the other is the one I was least concerned about.
Yeah.
Because I felt, to our point, that she was very clear if she's with you, she was very comfortable in her bisexuality of and being with a woman.
Yeah.
The other one I felt like was still seeking male attention in ways that were disruptive and would have been disruptive in any situation where they want the male flirt. And
yeah,
that's
and I
different.
think whether it's male or female, someone wanting the flirt isn't going to make you feel safe in a relationship. But the male flirt leads us into that term fetishization, because guys, many guys have a fantasy or a fetish about seeing 2 women together. And so I think sometimes guys might not take a woman seriously if she identifies as bi. They'll just be like, oh, you want to be with a woman? That's hot. And it's more like a fetish thing, and they don't take it seriously in terms of the attraction piece.
Boy, yes, to that. And as we all have been probably dealt with that coming at us over our years.
Yes.
Probably what happened to us at this point in our life is we probably aged out of that, but
no one's fetishizing us anymore for anything.
But it has happened.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it's funny because in my therapy practice, I mean, obviously infidelity comes up in couples therapy sometimes, and often men don't take it seriously. Like, oh, my girlfriend or my wife made out with another woman at the bar, or had sex with another woman. They don't take that nearly as seriously as if she had had sex with or made out with a man. And what I see from my perspective is that's the one you got to watch out for the most, because the emotional connection, or the possibility for her getting emotionally pulled away by a woman, seems pretty high. But I don't think most guys realize that, because it's fetishized.
Yes, that's true. And the other thing, and some of the research I've done over the last couple of months, women are more fluid in their sexuality than men, just generally. And that their ability to, again, I mean, first one to say yes, they need to be much more concerned about their wife hanging out and having sex with a woman, because they're a lot more likely to be able to transition to that relationship. If they fall in love, they more easily make the sex work than men can do that,
Yes.
and don't do that well. So Yeah, that's a slippery slope there, buddy.
It is a slippery slope. So watch out, men out there. I wanted to talk about the thing you just brought up about more women identify as bisexual or sexually fluid than men. And I'm often curious about this, and I don't know if there's a way to get to this answer, but in our culture, you often see women being affectionate with each other, heterosexual women. They're walking down the street with their best friend and they have their arms around each other, they're holding hands, they often hug their friends when they see them. And so it's not a big leap to think about women being sexual with other women. But in our culture, men do not do that. Men don't hold hands with their best friends. They often don't even hug their best friends. There's not that physical affection between men. And so I wonder if men don't allow themselves to even consider the possibility of being attracted to other men because of our culture, or if they genuinely are not attracted to men.
Well, we talk about metrosexuals, and I believe that there are probably more of those out there than and more guys willing to talk about those, younger guys willing to talk about that now. And I think some of the younger guys are more affectionate. But generally, that's still a taboo thing, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. And I had one of my professors again in my doc program that he was kind of a cranky old gay man, and he said his theory was that men are not very often bisexual. And he said, I've never seen a bisexual, in quotes, man leave his wife for another woman. So in other words, if you're identifying as bi, you're probably that's just your springboard to coming out as gay. That was his theory. I mean, I think everybody's got their own ideas about this, but men rarely admit to being bisexual in our culture.
I could subscribe to that. That makes sense to me. That's probably pretty true, I would guess.
Yeah. So I do think that bi people are getting a little more visibility in pop culture. I am not a big participant in pop culture, so I'm not necessarily the best to spout out facts or celebrities along these lines. But I know that you see it more often, I think, on TV, and in the celebrity circles, that it's okay. Like you'll see women kissing other women at award shows and things like that. So I think bi visibility is becoming a little bit more prominent.
Well, then when you look at Congress right now, there are 12 or 13 congressmen and women that are out.
Okay.
As well,
Queer.
as queer, okay? But there's only one woman in that whole group of 13 that is gay. I mean, is a bisexual.
Or that's identifying as bisexual.
Identifies as bisexual. Yes.
Okay.
Openly.
Yeah.
So you can kind of see it represents a number there. Still we are sadly represented people, if we are still woefully underrepresented up there. But anyway, to that point is the congresswoman out of Arizona.
Okay. So it's happening slowly but surely. So as we are wrapping things up today, there are a few takeaways that we want you to think about. And the first one of those is own your own story. So whether you are straight or gay or bi or pansexual or any other sexual orientation, own your own story. That you don't owe anybody a label, you don't owe anyone an explanation, but just be true to yourself and your desires.
The more that you can talk about it and really articulate how it works for you, the better people are going to understand it. So also just find, bi inclusive spaces and community. I really do believe the more we have confidence in who we are and the more that we can articulate who we are, then the more spaces you will find that are welcoming to you, whether they are bi spaces or gay spaces, whatever.
Yep, I think that's true. And if you're dating someone who's newly out, or if you're dating someone who's questioning, or if you're dating someone who identifies as bi, try to lead with curiosity. So don't jump in with a judgment, don't jump in with assumptions, but just try to be curious about them and get more information, ask some questions.
So I'm just going to address from last time when I said that if I was going to date somebody and then they were just coming out, that I would run screaming the other way. So I would like to say that we all us gay people have a role out there, because if we have more and more brothers and sisters that are trying to come out of the closet, so to speak, or at least, exploring their bisexuality with a different sex than they are currently with, then we have to step up and take one for the team, because they need to come out with someone. Okay. But I want to say that I earned a plethora of toaster ovens in my younger years, and I did my tour of duty. So now I get to rest.
You're not here for it anymore.
I'm not here for it anymore, but I did my turn.
Okay. Well, we did get some comments about that we'll be discussing in our after party episode. But anyway, so if you are listening to us and you're questioning your own sexual orientation, it's okay to not have it perfectly defined. And we just want to emphasize that you don't have to label yourself. You can just sit with it. You can explore and be fully yourself, but not have it perfectly defined.
You're not half gay and half straight.
Yeah. You're just fully you.
And you're bi doesn't mean that you get double chances on date night.
But it does double your chances of having a good story. So if you have a good story about your experience with bisexuality, about your experience of dating someone who identifies as bi, please email us. We'd love to hear from you. We are getting so many fun comments and texts and emails from our listeners. So the way you can reach us is info@dateableaf.com. You can also find us on our Instagram, which is @dateableaf. If you want to discuss this topic with your partner, so you have something to chat about between episodes, why don't you both talk to each other about how you define your sexual orientation? So let's use the Kinsey scale. If you're 0, then you are 100% opposite sex oriented. And if you're a 6, you're 100% same sex oriented. But remember, almost nobody is truly at either of these extremes. So just have a conversation with your partner about that and see what that opens up. And next week, we are going to be talking about that is not a boundary, babe. It's emotional micromanagement, how to set and maintain appropriate boundaries with your partner. So join us next week. And as always, we want to thank you for listening to the Dateable AF podcast, where we help you find your happy ending.
Remember, be bold, be kind, and for the love of queer dating, don't text your ex. Stay dateable.
AF.